The crisp white snow of winter, the vibrant bloom of spring flowers, the warm sun on a summer beach, the rich, golden hues of autumn leaves. This beautiful, predictable cycle governs our lives. It's a rhythm we've known since the dawn of our species. And it's all thanks to one tiny, crucial number: the Earth's 23.5-degree tilt. This slight wobble is the silent architect of civilization. It determines when we plant, when we harvest, and when we celebrate. It's the reason for seasons, the engine of our world's climate. But what if, tomorrow, that tilt suddenly vanished? What if the Earth straightened up, perfectly upright on its axis? Welcome to the world without seasons. Welcome to a planet of extremes. The first and most immediate consequence would be simple, yet profound. Every single location on Earth would now receive the exact same amount of sunlight every single day of the year. The seasons, spring, summer, fall, and winter, would be instantly and permanently canceled. For our planet, the sun would become permanently fixed directly above the equator, never straying north or south. Think about what that means. For those living in the Arctic and Antarctic regions, the sun would dip permanently below the horizon, never to rise again. The polar regions would be plunged into an eternal, star-filled night. The ice caps, already vast, would begin to expand relentlessly, freezing solid and locking up more and more of the planet's moisture in their icy grip. The once cyclical dance of light and dark would be over, replaced by unending twilight and then total blackness. The cold would be absolute. Now, consider the mid-latitudes. Places like the United States, most of Europe, and vast parts of China, the very cradles where civilization as we know it thrives, would be stuck. They would exist in a state of perpetual spring or autumn. Sounds pleasant, right? A world of mild temperatures, year-round. But this apparent paradise hides a deadly flaw. Without the cyclical heat of summer or the deep cold of winter, natural systems would break down. The relief that these seasonal changes bring, the resetting of ecosystems, would be gone. Pests that are normally killed off by winter frosts would now thrive and multiply unchecked, year after year. Plants that rely on specific temperature cues to flower or go dormant would become confused, their life cycles completely disrupted. We would be living in a world that is superficially mild, but biologically broken, a gentle but relentless slide into ecological chaos. It would be a world without change, and therefore, a world without renewal. This fixed, unchanging sunlight would trigger a climate catastrophe on a scale we can barely imagine. It would create a devastating thermal gradient across the planet. The equatorial band, now receiving constant, direct, intense sunlight day after day, would begin to heat up uncontrollably. With no seasonal relief, no tilt to shift the sun's most direct rays, this region would transform into an unbearably hot, uninhabitable desert. Temperatures would soar past 150 degrees Fahrenheit or 65 degrees Celsius. The oceans in this belt would start to boil, releasing immense amounts of water vapor into an already superheated atmosphere. Life here would be scoured from the surface. It would become a permanent, searing furnace circling the globe. Meanwhile, the opposite would be happening at the poles. Without any seasonal sunlight to bring a summer thaw, the polar regions would become colder than anything we currently experience on Earth. The cold would be absolute and unrelenting. The ice sheets, no longer receding in the summer, would begin a terrifying, inexorable expansion. They would march outwards from the poles, covering more and more of the globe. North America, Europe, and Asia would see new ice ages begin, not over thousands of years, but within decades. The expanding ice would not just cover land. It would freeze the oceans, pushing the boundaries of the habitable world further and further towards the equator. Earth would be split into two extreme and deadly zones. This enormous temperature difference between a boiling equator and frozen poles would supercharge the atmosphere, turning our weather systems into monstrous engines of destruction. The fundamental driver of weather is the movement of heat from the tropics to the poles. In this new world, that heat difference would be extreme, creating atmospheric instability on a planetary scale. Imagine hurricanes the size of entire continents. Permanent superstorms fueled by the frantic energy exchange between the burning equator and the frozen poles. The winds would be unlike anything human structures could withstand, constantly scouring the transitional zones. Rainfall patterns, the lifeblood of our ecosystems and agriculture, would completely collapse. The predictable monsoons and seasonal rains that billions rely on would vanish. Instead, we'd see chaotic, violent downpours in some areas and permanent, brutal drought in others, leading to mass famine and the collapse of entire food webs. The impact on life itself would be nothing short of a biological collapse. Most life on Earth, from the smallest insect to the largest whale, and especially our own agriculture, is programmed by the seasons. The changing length of days and the fluctuation in temperature are the fundamental cues for migration, hibernation, mating, and growth. With a constant 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of darkness everywhere, and with temperatures locked into static bands, these biological clocks would be shattered. The constant light and heat at the equator would destroy crop cycles. The perpetual twilight and cold of the mid-latitudes would do the same. We would lose nearly all global food production within a few years. The complex, interwoven tapestry of life, built upon the reliable rhythm of the seasons, would unravel. The great migrations would cease. The forests would sicken. The oceans would stratify and die. Faced with this apocalypse, humanity's only chance for survival would be a desperate, mass migration. We would be forced to abandon the scorching equatorial deserts and flee the advancing ice sheets of the poles. Our entire global population would have to cram into the two narrow, temperate bands between the eternal desert and the expanding ice caps. These chaotic, narrow strips of land, perpetually stuck in a mild but ecologically broken twilight, would quickly become the most overcrowded and politically unstable places in human history. Nations would cease to exist. Trillions of dollars of infrastructure would be abandoned. The fight for the last remaining scraps of habitable land and dwindling resources would be brutal and absolute. It would be a refugee crisis on a species-wide level. In the end, our planet would eventually stabilize, but it would be a world alien to us. It would be a bizarre, dual-climate planet, one half a permanent, scorched oven, the other a deep, expanding freezer. In between, two thin rings of perpetual twilight would house the desperate remnants of humanity, living on a world they no longer recognize. That 23.5-degree tilt isn't just a curious astronomical fact. It is the linchpin of our existence. It's the reason we have a world of such rich diversity and abundance. It's a gift of cosmic chance, a delicate balance that makes our home, our Earth, possible. It's a wobble that we should be thankful for every single day. Thank you for watching. If you found this journey thought-provoking, consider subscribing for more explorations into our incredible universe.